The crack of gunfire tore through the mountain air like fabric ripping. Sergeant First Class Connor Hayes pressed his body against the cold stone, dirt exploding inches from his face. The radio crackled with overlapping voices, each one more desperate than the last. Contact rear, multiple hostiles. They're flanking left. We're surrounded. SEAL Team 9 had walked straight into hell. The intelligence briefing had promised light resistance, maybe a dozen fighters guarding a weapons cache in the remote valley. Instead, they'd stumbled into what felt like an entire battalion. The rocky terrain that was supposed to provide cover had become a trap, with enemy positions on 3 ridgelines forming a kill box around them. Hayes counted heads. All 12 men accounted for, but ammunition was burning fast. The nearest extraction point was 4 clicks through enemy-controlled territory. Radio jamming made communication with base nearly impossible, static drowning out every third word. "Hayes, we need to move." Lieutenant Marcus Webb shouted over the gunfire. "They're closing the gap, 50 meters. That's how close the enemy had pushed. Hayes could see their shadows moving between rocks, hear their coordinated shouts. Professional fighters, not the scattered insurgents they'd expected. Someone had known they were coming. A rocket-propelled grenade screamed overhead, detonating against the cliff face behind them. Shrapnel peppered Hayes' helmet. His ears rang, but training kept him focused. They needed a miracle, or they'd be writing letters home to 12 families. 800 meters above the chaos, Staff Sergeant Ariella Kane lay perfectly still behind her rifle. The ghillie suit broke up her outline against the mountain scree, rendering her invisible to anyone who didn't know exactly where to look. Through her scope, she watched the SEAL team's desperate situation unfold with clinical precision. She'd been in position for 6 hours of a classified reconnaissance operation codenamed Ghost Sight. Her orders were explicit: observe, report, do not engage. She was a ghost. Ghosts didn't leave traces, didn't fire shots, didn't exist. The radio in her ear carried fragments of the SEAL team's distress calls. Her finger rested alongside the trigger guard of her custom M2010 ESR. Not on it. Not yet. The rules were clear. Break them, and Ghost Sight would disavow her existence entirely. But those men were dying. Ariella's breath came slow and measured as she calculated angles. Wind speed, 8 miles per hour. Cross breeze from the northeast. Temperature, 42 degrees. Humidity, low. Distance to nearest enemy position, 760 meters. She'd made harder shots before. The enemy commander moved into view, a tall man in tactical gear, directing his fighters with hand signals. He was organizing a final push, grouping forces for an overwhelming assault. In 90 seconds, maybe less, the SEALs would be overrun. Ariella's jaw tightened. She thought of Jackson, her spotter, her friend bleeding out in the Hindu Kush 2 years ago because she'd followed orders instead of her instinct. She'd stayed silent when she knew the route was compromised. She'd been a good soldier. Jackson had died a good soldier's death. Not again, she whispered. Her finger moved to the trigger. The first shot came from nowhere. One moment, the enemy commander was raising his rifle to signal the final assault. The next, his head snapped back, and he crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. The crack of the rifle shot reached them a heartbeat later, echoing off the valley walls. Hayes froze. That wasn't friendly fire from their position. The angle was all wrong. The second shot dropped the machine gunner who'd been shredding their cover. The third took out a spotter directing mortar fire. Each shot came from a different impossible angle, as if the shooter was moving between positions faster than physics allowed. What the hell? Webb pressed against the rock beside Hayes. UAV support? Negative. Hayes scanned the sky. No drones overhead. Someone's shooting manual. The enemy fighters scattered, diving for cover, their coordinated assault dissolving into confusion. They fired blindly at the ridgelines, unable to locate their attacker. The pressure on the SEAL team eased immediately. Hayes pressed his radio. "Any station, this is Hammer 1. Are we receiving fire support? Over." Static. Then a broken response from command. "Hammer 1, no assets. Your grid." Say again? So it wasn't official. Someone was helping them off the books. Through his optics, Hayes tracked the incoming fire pattern. The shots originated from multiple positions on the northern ridge, but the pattern was too precise, too fast. Either they had a whole sniper team up there, or one impossibly skilled shooter who could displace and re-engage faster than anyone Hayes had ever seen. Another shot. An enemy fighter attempting to flank their position dropped mid-stride, 700 meters out. The bullet placement was perfect center mass, no wasted motion. "That's not luck," Hayes muttered. "That's art." Ariella moved like water flowing downhill, smooth, inevitable, following the path of least resistance. 3 shots from position Alpha, displaced. 4 shots from position Bravo, displaced again. The enemy couldn't track her because she never stayed still long enough to be found. Her ghillie suit snagged on rocks as she low-crawled between positions. Sweat soaked her base layer despite the mountain cold. Her rifle, normally weighing 11 pounds, felt like 50 after 6 hours of motionless observation. But her hands remained steady. She identified targets by priority, leaders first, heavy weapons second, anyone coordinating group movement third. The enemy force was well trained, but their communication was breaking down. They'd expected an easy kill, not a fight against an invisible opponent. Through her scope, Ariella watched the SEAL team begin to reorganize. They were professionals, using the confusion to redistribute ammunition and tighten their defensive perimeter. Good, they'd survive another 10 minutes if she could keep the pressure off. But the enemy had artillery, and they'd start using it soon. She keyed her concealed radio to the emergency frequency, knowing it would blow her ghost sight cover completely. "Hammer 1, this is Overwatch. You have approximately 8 minutes before they call fire missions on your position. Recommend immediate displacement northeast, bearing 045, 200 meters. There's a wadi that'll give you hard cover." Silence on the other end. Then, "Overwatch, identify yourself." "Negative. Move now, or you're all dead. Overwatch out." She didn't wait for a response. Her scope swept back to the valley floor, finding the enemy radio operator crouched behind a boulder. The man was speaking rapidly into his handset, almost certainly calling for indirect fire. Distance, 820 meters. Elevated position. Wind pushed her shot pattern 3 inches right at this range. She adjusted, exhaled halfway, held it. The trigger broke clean. The radio operator's call for artillery died with him. The enemy commander's replacement was smarter than his predecessor. Instead of exposing himself, he sent runners between positions, communicating by hand signal rather than radio. Within minutes, Ariella saw the shift in their tactics. They stopped trying to assault the SEAL team. Instead, they began moving in a new pattern, half maintaining pressure on the valley floor while the others turned toward the northern ridge. Toward her, "They're coming," she whispered to herself. Hayes saw it too. Through his optics, he watched enemy fighters break off from the main force, beginning a cautious advance up the mountainside. They moved in fire teams, covering each other's movement, using terrain intelligently. "They're going after whoever's helping us," Webb said. Hayes made a decision that would either save his team or doom them all. "First and second squad, you're with me. We're going up. Third squad. Maintain this position and keep them busy." "Sir?" Webb's expression showed exactly what he thought of that plan. "We don't even know who's up there. I know they saved our lives. That's enough." Hayes checked his magazine, "And if the enemy wants them dead that badly, we need them alive. Move out." The climb was brutal. The mountainside that Ariella had ascended in darkness, taking 3 hours to carefully position herself, the SEALs now had to assault in daylight under fire. They moved fast, using speed instead of stealth, trusting their unknown guardian to keep the enemy's heads down. Ariella saw them coming and felt her stomach drop. "No, no, no," she hissed. "Stay down. Don't be heroes." But they kept climbing, and now she had a choice. Abandon her position and disappear, or stay and protect men who were risking everything to reach her. The enemy fire teams were closer now, less than 300 meters downslope. At that range, her advantage evaporated. Long-range precision meant nothing in close combat. She was a sniper, not an assault fighter. She displaced again, moving to a position that would give her overlapping fields of fire on both the advancing enemy and the valley below. Her ammunition was running low, 12 rounds left. She'd started the day with 40. Through her scope, she acquired a target, an enemy fighter using a boulder for cover while his teammate advanced. She put a round through the gap between rocks, dropping him, his nerdo for cover, and she put the next round through his exposed leg. Not fatal, but he wouldn't be climbing any mountains soon. The SEALs were halfway up now. Hayes moved like he'd been born in mountains, choosing routes that provided cover while maintaining upward momentum. His team followed in a staggered column, each man covering different approach angles. Ariella's radio crackled. Hayes's voice. "Overwatch, we're coming to you. Don't shoot us." She keyed the mic. "I didn't ask for backup." "Yeah, well, you're getting it anyway." Where do you need us? Professional courtesy demanded she give them good information. 3 fire teams advancing on my position from the southwest, approximately 270 meters and closing. They'll reach effective range in 4 minutes. Copy that. We'll intercept. What's your ammunition status? She hesitated, admitting weakness went against every instinct. But these men were putting their lives on the line for a stranger. They deserved honesty. Low, she said simply, then sit tight. We're almost there. The SEALs reached Ariella's position with 90 seconds to spare. Hayes crested the ridge first, scanning for threats, and nearly stepped on her before his brain registered the ghillie-suited figure pressed into a rock depression. Friendly, she said sharply, not moving her rifle from its rest. Hayes held up a hand, stopping his team's advance. For a long moment, he just stared. The shooter who'd saved 12 lives with impossible precision was a woman, maybe 5'6", with intense gray eyes visible through the ghillie suit's face netting. Staff Sergeant Ariella Kane, she said, still not moving. Ghost Sight Program. Connor Hayes, SEAL Team 9. He recovered his professional composure. Never heard of Ghost Sight. That's the point. She shifted slightly, and Hayes saw the rifle, a heavily modified M2010 with custom glass and a suppressor that had been hand-fitted. You need to fall back. This position is about to get very hot. We're not leaving you. I work alone. Not anymore. The first enemy fighter appeared 200 meters downslope, moving between rocks with cautious precision. Ariella's rifle tracked him smoothly. Let me, Hayes said, raising his own weapon. That's a 400-meter shot with a carbine in mountain wind, Ariella said flatly. You'll miss, give away our position, and die. I'll take it. She fired. The fighter dropped. She cycled the bolt smooth, practiced, automatic, and scanned for the next target. Hayes had commanded Special Operations Forces for 8 years. He'd worked with the best snipers in the world. He'd never seen anyone move with this level of calm precision under pressure. Where'd you train? Everywhere that mattered. Another shot. Another target down. Army Sniper School, Sodik, then 6 months at a place that doesn't exist. 3 years in the field before they recruited me for Ghost Sight. Webb and his fire team reached the position, spreading out to establish a defensive perimeter. His eyes widened when he saw Ariella, but he kept his mouth shut and got to work. How many left? Webb asked Hayes. 2 fire teams still advancing. Maybe 8 fighters total. Ariella spoke without looking away from her scope. 9. There's a spotter in the rocks at 285 meters, controlling their movement. Take him out. The rest will lose coordination. Hayes looked where she indicated. He saw nothing but rocks and shadows. I don't see him. Left side of the large boulder, 3rd one up from the base. He's wearing a brown jacket, blending with the rock face. Watch for movement. Hayes stared for 10 seconds before catching it, the subtle shift of fabric against stone. How did you? It's what I do. The enemy spotter moved again, rising slightly to get a better view. Ariella's finger tightened on the trigger, then relaxed. He's yours, she told Hayes. You're closer, better angle. Aim 3 inches left of where you think he is. Wind compensation. Hayes settled into position, controlled his breathing, and took the shot. The spotter jerked and fell. Good kill, Ariella said. It wasn't praise, just fact. The remaining enemy fighters lost their cohesion immediately. Without their spotter coordinating movement, they began making mistakes, exposing themselves, moving predictably. The SEALs picked them with disciplined fire. In 3 minutes, it was over. They had maybe 20 minutes before enemy reinforcements arrived. Hayes used the time to properly assess their situation and the woman who'd changed everything. Ariella had stripped off the upper portion of her ghillie suit, revealing a lean, compact frame in tactical gear. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight braid, and her face showed the kind of weathering that came from years in harsh environments. Her hands moved with unconscious efficiency as she cleaned her rifle, checking each component with the focused attention of a master craftsman maintaining precious tools. Ghost Sight, Hayes said, settling beside her. I'm guessing that's not in any official organizational chart. It's not in any chart at all. She worked a cleaning patch through the barrel. We don't exist. We don't have support. We don't take credit. We just watch, report, and disappear. So why'd you break protocol? Her hands stilled for just a moment. When she spoke, her voice carried an edge that hadn't been there before. 2 years ago, I had a spotter. Best friend I ever had, callsign Jackson. We were on a reconnaissance mission in Afghanistan when I picked up signs that our extraction route was compromised. I reported it, but command overruled my assessment, said the intel was solid. She resumed cleaning the rifle, movements perhaps a bit more forceful than necessary. Jackson died protecting me when they hit our extraction point. 5 bullets. I couldn't stop the bleeding. Hayes knew that icular brand of grief. Every special operator carried those ghosts. After that, Ariella continued. I requested transfer to Ghost Site. Solo operations, no team to risk, no one to lose. They paired me with a psychiatrist who said I was avoiding emotional attachment through professional isolation. A brief, humorless smile. I told him he was right. He approved me anyway. And today? Today I heard 12 men about to die because someone ignored good intelligence. Again. She looked directly at Hayes for the first time, those gray eyes hard as flint. I'm not losing anyone else because I followed orders when my gut said otherwise. Webb approached, crouching beside them. Sir, we've got movement in the valley. Looks like enemy reinforcements, at least 30 fighters, plus vehicles. Hayes pulled out his map. Their position was strong defensively, but they couldn't hold indefinitely. Ammunition was limited, and they had no heavy weapons. The enemy, on the other hand, clearly had plenty of both. Ariella leaned over to study the map. Her finger traced a narrow ravine cutting through the northern slope. There. The Serpent's Throat, locals call it. Narrow enough that vehicles can't follow, too rocky for them to flank effectively. It'll channel them into a kill zone, and our exit continues north for 2 clicks. Comes out near a plateau where you could land a helicopter if command gets their act together. She met Hayes' gaze. But it's a death trap if we defend from the wrong positions. You'll need someone who knows these mountains. Hayes made his decision. Then you're with us. Not as a ghost this time, as of the team. For the first time since they'd met, something shifted in Ariella's expression. Not quite a smile, but something close to it. I should warn you, Sergeant Hayes. I'm not very good at playing well with others. Yeah, Hayes said, standing and offering her a hand up. I'm getting that impression. The ravine cut through the mountain like a wound, 50 feet across at its widest point, narrowing to barely shoulder width in places. The walls rose 30 feet on either side, jagged rock that would shred anyone trying to climb it under fire. Perfect defensive terrain if you knew how to use it. Ariella moved point, with Hayes and his team strung out behind her in tactical formation. She'd memorized this terrain during her initial reconnaissance, knew every boulder, every choke point, every position that offered advantages. Behind them, the enemy force was organizing for pursuit. They'd learned caution after losing so many fighters to the mysterious sniper, but they had numbers and determination. Command had clearly ordered them to eliminate all witnesses to whatever operation they were running in these mountains. Stop here, Ariella said, holding up a fist. The team froze. They'd reached a section where the ravine bent sharply left, then right a double switchback that created natural bottlenecks. Large boulders provided cover for defenders while leaving attackers exposed. This is where we make our stand, she said, already moving to position herself on a ledge 8 feet up the left wall. Webb, take your fire team to that cluster of rocks at the second bend. Hayes, you and your men hold the first choke point. When they come through, we hit them in sequence. My position provides overwatch. You hammer them from ground level. Hayes studied the setup. What about our 6? They could send climbers over the ridge. They could, Ariella agreed, settling into her shooting position. But I've been watching their doctrine. They're aggressive, but they're also risk-averse after taking casualties. They'll come straight up the gut rather than risk splitting forces in unknown terrain. You sure about that? 70%. Hayes had to smile. Most people would have said they were certain to sound confident. Ariella just gave him honest odds. Good enough. Set up. The SEALs moved with practiced efficiency, each man finding cover that provided interlocking fields of fire. They set their remaining claymore mines at the choke points, wired for command detonation. Ammunition was redistributed, so the automatic riflemen had maximum capacity. Ariella opened her rifle case and pulled out her last 3 magazines. 36 rounds total. She'd make them count. The wait was always the hardest. Minutes stretched like hours as they listened to the enemy force approaching. Voices echoing off the ravine walls. Equipment rattling. The sound of many boots on rock. Then the first fighters appeared at the ravine entrance, moving cautiously in a wedge formation. They'd learned to respect the sniper, scanning the ridge lines before advancing. But they weren't looking up high enough, and they didn't see Ariella pressed against the rock face, barely visible even if they'd known where to look. Hayes let them penetrate deep 10 men into the ravine, then 15, then 20. His thumb rested on the claymore detonator. Beside him, his automatic rifleman steadied his weapon against a boulder, aiming at the mass of targets. Ariella's voice, barely audible in their earpieces. Leader is third from front, left side. Green jacket, red scarf. On my shot, Hayes didn't question it. All elements, stand by. Through her scope, Ariella centered the reticle on the enemy commander's chest. This was an 800-meter shot from her position, straight down, and she was shooting at a steep angle, which affected bullet trajectory. She compensated automatically, muscle memory and mathematics combining into instinct. 3, 2, 1, execute. Her rifle bucked. The commander dropped. Hayes mashed the claymore detonator. The ravine exploded with thunder and steel. The claymore mines transformed the ravine into an abattoir. 700 steel balls traveling at 4,000 feet per second shredded everything in a 60-degree arc. The enemy formation disintegrated, fighters thrown against rock walls or dropped where they stood. But they were professionals. The survivors didn't panic. They returned fire immediately, filling the air with bullets that sparked off stones and whined through the narrow space. Ariella worked her rifle like a surgeon's scalpel, each shot eliminating specific threats. An enemy fighter trying to set up a machine gun dropped. A man with an RPG launcher down before he could aim. Someone attempting to organize a retreat stopped cold. Hayes and his SEALs poured disciplined fire into the kill zone. The automatic weapons laid down suppressive fire while riflemen picked targets. The second claymore detonated, catching enemy fighters trying to take cover behind boulders. The enemy broke. Those who could move retreated in disorder, dragging wounded when possible, leaving dead when necessary. In 90 seconds, the assault had been shattered. Cease fire, Hayes commanded. Conserve ammunition. Silence fell over the ravine, broken only by groans from wounded enemy fighters and the ringing in everyone's ears. Smoke from the explosives drifted through the narrow space like fog. Webb moved forward to assess. 17 enemy down. Maybe 10 or 12 retreated. We're clear for now. They'll be back, Ariella said, already scanning for the next threat. And they'll be smarter next time. She was right. 20 minutes later, the enemy tried a different approach. Instead of charging straight in, they set up firing positions at the ravine entrance and began methodical suppressive fire, pinning the SEALs down while another element attempted to scale the ravine walls. Ariella spotted the climbers immediately. Contact right. High. They're trying to flank. Can you stop them? Hayes asked, already shifting his team to counter. Not all of them. She lined up her shot. I've got 6 rounds left. That's 6 dead climbers, but if there are more, then we handle it the old-fashioned way. Hayes grabbed his rifle and spare magazines. Webb, you're in command of ground position. I'm going up. Sir, that's an order. Hayes had done plenty of climbing in his career, but never under fire in hostile territory with enemies above and below. He moved fast, using anger and adrenaline to overcome the burning in his muscles. Ariella provided precision fire, dropping the lead climbers and forcing others to take cover. He reached a ledge 20 feet up just as an enemy fighter crested the wall 10 meters away. Hayes's rifle came up. 2 shots center mass. The fighter fell backward, tumbling into the ravine below. Another climber appeared. Hayes fired, but his angle was wrong. The round sparked off rock. The enemy fighter returned fire, bullets stitching the wall near Hayes's head. Then the fighter's throat exploded in red mist as Ariella's bullet found its mark from an impossible angle. Hayes didn't waste time being impressed. He scrambled higher, racing to secure the high ground before more climbers reached it. Ariella was down to her last magazine. 5 rounds. She'd need to make each one perfect. The enemy's third assault came with darkness falling. They'd learned from their mistakes, using smoke grenades to obscure the ravine entrance and advancing under its cover. Thermal scopes would have cut through the smoke, but the SEALs didn't have that luxury. Ariella keyed her radio. Hayes, I can't see through the smoke. You're running blind down there. Copy that. Hayes's voice was tight with controlled tension. We're falling back to position Bravo. Recommend you displace 2. She'd already started moving, gathering her equipment with practiced efficiency. The ledge that had served her well was about to become a trap. She low-crawled to a new position further up the ravine, finding a crack in the rock face barely wide enough for her body. Below, the enemy poured into the ravine under smoke cover. Hayes had pulled his team back to the second choke point, consolidating their defense. They had maybe 200 rounds of ammunition left total. Ariella wedged herself into position and waited for the smoke to thin. When it did, she saw the enemy had learned their lesson well. They moved in small groups, using cover intelligently, never exposing themselves unnecessarily. They'd also brought up a heavy machine gun, setting it up at the ravine entrance to provide suppressive fire. "That machine gun has to go," Hayes said over the radio. "Working on it," Ariella replied. The distance was 600 meters, and the machine gun crew had positioned themselves behind a makeshift barrier of rocks and sandbags. Only the gunner's head and shoulders were visible, and only intermittently when he rose to fire. Ariella settled the reticle on the spot where the gunner would appear. Waited. Controlled her breathing. The world narrowed to the scope's view. The gunner rose. Her finger tightened. The rifle kicked. Through the scope, she saw the gunner's helmet snap back, and then he collapsed behind the barrier. "Guns down," she reported. "Not for long," Webb said. "They've got a replacement moving up." Ariella saw him, a fighter sprinting toward the gun position, clearly intending to take over. She led his movement, calculating his speed and trajectory. Her fourth round caught him in mid-stride. He went down hard and didn't move. 2 rounds left. The enemy responded with focused fire on her position. Bullets whined off rocks all around her. Stone chips peppered her face, drawing blood. She pressed deeper into the crack, making herself impossibly small. "Overwatch, you need to displace," Hayes called. "That's an order." "Negative," she said calmly. "This is the only angle on their command element. I move, you lose your eyes. You stay there, you die. Then I'd doing my job." Something in her tone must have told Hayes that arguing was pointless. He switched tactics. "Then give me something to work with. What do you see?" Ariella forced herself to ignore the bullets and focus on her scope. Professional distance, clinical observation. It's what had kept her alive this long. "I count 23 fighters, dispersed across 3 positions. They're setting up for a coordinated push. You've got maybe 2 minutes before they come at you with everything they have left. Options?" She studied the terrain through her scope. Wargaming scenarios. Then she saw a narrow ledge on the opposite wall that, if she could reach it, would give her an angle on all 3 enemy positions. But getting there meant crossing 10 feet of open ground under direct fire. "I have an idea," she said, "but it's a bad one. Those are my favorite kind." Ariella didn't give herself time to think about it. Thinking meant acknowledging the stupidity of what she was about to do, and acknowledgement meant hesitation, and hesitation meant death. She exploded from her position, sprinting across the open ground. Bullets chased her, tracking her movement, but she'd timed it for the moment when the enemy fighters were reloading after their suppressive burst. 3 seconds of freedom. She used every one. She dove the last 6 feet, landing hard on the ledge, feeling something in her left shoulder pop wrong. Pain lanced through her, but she didn't have time for pain. She brought her rifle up one-handed, ignoring the way her shoulder screamed in protest. From this angle, all 3 enemy positions were visible. Not clear shots. There were no clear shots anymore, but possible ones. 2 rounds left. 23 targets. Hayes saw what she was doing and understood immediately. All elements, on Overwatch's shots, we assault. Full aggression, drive straight through their positions. This is our last chance. Ariella controlled her breathing despite the pain. 1 breath in, 1 breath out. The scope steadied. The enemy commander had exposed himself, coordinating the final assault. He was the linchpin of their entire operation. Her finger touched the trigger. The world slowed. Then her shoulder gave out, spasming from the damaged muscles. The rifle shifted. The shot would miss. No time to reset. The commander was dropping back into cover. She did something she'd been told was impossible in sniper school. She fired while still moving, using her body's momentum to guide the bullet rather than fighting it. The rifle cracked. The bullet flew through the scope, still fighting for stability. She saw the commander's head snap sideways. Perfect shot through the temple, despite everything. 1 round left. The enemy force wavered with their commander down. Hayes saw the moment and seized it. Go, go, go. The SEALs stormed forward, their assault sudden and overwhelming. The enemy fighters, already shaken, began to fall back. But they still had superior numbers, and desperation made them dangerous. Ariella scanned for the next critical target. They're an enemy fighter with an RPG, setting up to fire at the advancing SEALs. The shot was 800 meters through swirling gun smoke, at a target that was mostly hidden behind a boulder. Impossible shot. But then again, her entire day had been impossible. She'd trained for this moment her entire career. All the hours on the range, all the study of ballistics and wind and atmospheric pressure, all the meditation on breathing and heartbeat, and the space between one moment and the next. It came down to this: 1 woman, 1 rifle, 1 bullet. She exhaled halfway and held it. The scope's reticle settled. The world went silent in the way it does when everything else falls away, and only the shot remains. The trigger broke. The rifle bucked against her damaged shoulder, sending agony through her entire upper body. She didn't care. Through the scope, she watched the bullet fly true. The RPG gunner collapsed, his weapon clattering unfired on the rocks. Her rifle was empty. She had nothing left to give. Hayes and his SEALs crashed into the enemy position like a wave hitting shore. Close quarters battle, vicious and brief. The enemy fighters, leaderless and demoralized, broke and ran. Those who could escape scattered into the darkness. Those who couldn't surrendered or died. 3 minutes of violence, and then silence. Ariella tried to move and discovered her body had other ideas. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the damage was becoming clear. Dislocated shoulder, lacerations from rock fragments, bruised ribs from her diving landing. Dehydration and exhaustion from 12 hours of continuous operations. She heard boots on rock. Hayes appeared, climbing up to her position. His face was streaked with dirt and someone else's blood, but he was grinning. "Clear," he said simply. Then he saw her shoulder, and his expression changed. "Medic. Get up here now." "I'm fine," Ariella said, which was obviously a lie. "Yeah, and I'm a ballerina." Hayes knelt beside her, examining the shoulder with practiced efficiency. "Definitely dislocated. This is going to hurt. Everything already hurts." "Fair point." He called down to his team. "Webb, get command on the horn. Tell them we need immediate extraction. 1 urgent surgical, 11 routine." "Copy that, boss." Hayes looked at Ariella. "You know, for someone who works alone, you've got a real talent for saving other people's asses." "It's a character flaw," she said. "I'm working on it." Despite everything, the pain, the exhaustion, the knowledge that her ghost site career was probably over, she felt something she hadn't experienced in 2 years. Not quite happiness, not quite peace, but something in that neighborhood. She'd broken every rule, abandoned her mission, revealed herself completely, and 12 men were alive because of it. The helicopter arrived at dawn, a black hawk threading through the mountain valleys like a needle through cloth. Hayes popped smoke to mark their position, and the pilot brought them in with the kind of precision that spoke of years doing this exact kind of extraction. Ariella was loaded first, her shoulder properly immobilized now but still throbbing with every heartbeat. The medic had given her something for the pain, and the world had taken on a slightly unreal quality, as if she was watching everything from a distance. Hayes climbed in beside her as the helicopter lifted off. Through the open door, she watched the mountains fall away, the ravine where they'd made their stand becoming just another fold in the landscape. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you get real medical care, probably a commendation you won't be allowed to display publicly, and a very uncomfortable conversation with whoever runs Ghost Site." "They'll bury me," Ariella said without emotion. "Too much exposure, too many witnesses. The whole point of the program is deniability." Hayes was quiet for a moment. Then, "What if you had other options?" "Like what?" "Like a team that could use someone with your skills. Someone who's proven they'll do the right thing even when the rules say otherwise." He met her eyes. "SEAL teams need snipers. Good ones, and you're the best I've ever seen." Ariella studied his face, looking for the angle. In her experience, offers that sounded too good usually were. "I don't follow orders well." "Yeah, I noticed." Hayes smiled. "But you follow the mission. You protect your people. That's what matters." "I don't have people anymore." "You do now. Whether you want them or not." The helicopter banked, heading for the forward operating base. Below them, the sun painted the mountains, gold and red, light and shadow, creating patterns that shifted with every passing moment. Ariella thought about Jackson, about the promise she'd made over his body. No more losses, no more silence when she knew the truth. She'd kept that promise today, even if it cost her everything. But maybe it hadn't cost everything. Maybe it had bought something instead. "I'll think about it," she said finally. Hayes nodded. "That's all I'm asking." 3 weeks later, after the shoulder surgery and the debriefing and the expected call from Ghost Site Command, informing her that her services were no longer required, Ariella stood on a beach in Virginia watching SEAL Team 9 run morning PT. Hayes jogged over, barely winded despite the 6-mile run. "You came. I said I'd think about it." She watched the team moving through their exercises with synchronized precision. "Doesn't mean I've decided." "Of course not." He handed her a folder. "This is the packet for transferring into SEAL support operations. Sniper specialty. It's a lot of paperwork, but the command structure already approved it pending your agreement. She took the folder but didn't open it. Why me? You could get any sniper in the military. Because you're not any sniper. Hayes looked out at the ocean, considering his words. I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've worked with the best operators in the world, but I've never seen anyone make the choices you made on that mountain. The tactical decisions were brilliant, yeah. But more than that, you chose to risk everything to save people you'd never met. That's not training. That's character. Or stupidity. Sometimes there's not much difference. He turned back to her. Look, I'm not going to pressure you. You've earned the right to make your own choice. But I will say this. Jackson would be proud of what you did up there. And I think maybe it's time to stop punishing yourself for the one time you followed orders instead of your gut. Ariella felt something tighten in her chest. She'd spent 2 years avoiding those words, that thought, that possibility of forgiveness. I work alone, she said, but the words didn't have the same conviction anymore. You did work alone. Hayes gestured at his team. But maybe you don't have to anymore. Maybe the best way to honor Jackson is to make sure no one else dies because you stayed silent. And you can't do that from the shadows. Webb jogged over, stopping beside Hayes. He'd been there on the mountain, had seen everything. Ma'am, he said formally. Then, with a slight smile, we could use someone who shoots like that. Gets boring just being good at stuff when we could watch someone be great. Flattery doesn't work on me. Wasn't flattery. Was just facts. More of the team were finishing their run, gathering at the water's edge. A few waved. She recognized faces from the mountain men she'd protected from an impossible position. Men who'd climbed up to help her when they could have escaped. Men who'd become her people without her permission. Ariella opened the folder and scanned the first page. Transfer request, medical clearance, security authorization. All the bureaucratic machinery that would transform her from ghost to soldier again. She thought about lonely vigils on cold mountains, about watching through scopes while life happened somewhere else, about the weight of responsibility without the balance of connection. She thought about Jackson, who'd always said she was the best shooter he'd ever seen but the worst teammate, because she never let anyone close enough to help. I have conditions, she said. Hayes raised an eyebrow. Such as, I keep my rifle. I choose my own positions. And if I call a threat, people listen. Done, and absolutely done. Anything else? Yeah. She met his eyes. If I do this, I do it all the way. No halfway. No holding back. I become of this team for real. That's the only way it works. Ariella looked down at the folder again, at the signature line waiting for her decision. 2 years ago, she'd walked away from teams and nurships and trust. She'd chosen solitude because it was safer, cleaner, simpler. But simple wasn't the same as right. She pulled out a pen and signed her name. Hayes grinned and offered his hand. Welcome to Team 9, Staff Sergeant Kane. She shook it, and for the first time in 2 years, the grip didn't feel like a farewell. It felt like a beginning. Behind them, the sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist. The team gathered closer, welcoming their new sniper with the casual acceptance that came from shared combat. Someone made a joke, someone else laughed. The sound of it was strange to Ariella's ears, casual and warm and completely foreign after so long alone. But maybe, she thought, strange wasn't the same as bad. Maybe strange was just different, and maybe different was exactly what she needed. She stood there on the beach with the team forming around her, watching the waves roll in endless rhythm against the shore, and felt something she hadn't allowed herself in years. Hope. Not the desperate kind that comes from wishing things were different, the quiet kind that comes from knowing that change is possible, that growth is real, that the person you were doesn't have to be the person you are. She'd spent 2 years as a ghost, watching the world from a distance, convinced that isolation was the price of never losing anyone again. But standing there with Hayes and Webb and the others, feeling the warmth of the sun and the possibility of connection, she understood something Jackson had tried to tell her before he died. The only way to truly honor the fallen is to keep living. Not just surviving, but actually living. With people. With purpose. With all the risk and pain and joy that comes from caring about something beyond yourself. So, Webb said, breaking into her thoughts. First round of drinks is on the new member, right? That's tradition. That's absolutely not tradition, Hayes said. You're just cheap. Can't it be both? Ariella surprised herself by laughing. It felt rusty, like a skill she hadn't practiced in too long. But it felt good too. I'll buy the first round, she said. but I'm not carrying anyone home." "Fair deal," Hayes said. He clapped her on the shoulder, the good one, and started walking toward the base. "Come on, let's get you processed in. Paperwork is terrible, but Webb knows all the shortcuts. I know how to fill out forms, sir." "Yeah, but do you know how to fill them out in a way that gets you the good gear? That's an art." As they walked, Ariella glanced back once at the ocean, at the mountains visible in the far distance. Somewhere out there were other ghosts, other watchers in the shadows, other people who'd chosen solitude over connection. She'd been one of them. Maybe she still was, in some ways. But she was also something new now, something better. She was of a team, and that, she was starting to think, might be the most important shot she'd ever taken, the one that brought her home.